Hello and welcome, gamers. I am John, host of Video Games in the World, and today's topic, Joe Rogan and video games. Joe Rogan is a stand-up comedian, podcaster, and also a UFC commentator and MMA icon. He has had many well-known guests on his podcast show, The Joe Rogan Experience, such as Jesse Ventura, Robert Downey Jr., Elon Musk, Bernie Sanders, Mike Tyson, Cenk Uygur, Dave Rubin, Ana Kasparian, Joey Diaz, etc. He even had major controversial figures such as Milo Yiannopoulos, Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, and Ben Shapiro. And now he has begun to tackle video games. Rogan admitted himself that he used to be an avid fan of video games, playing them frequently and obsessively. According to the popular podcast host, he used to have a real problem with them, going as far as to say in a recent broadcast that they're a dangerous waste of time. Oh boy. Speaking with CEO and founder of Spartan and the Death Race, Joe DeSana, Joe Rogan had a lot to say when the issue of video games came up, discussing how many kids take refuge in the past time when there's no inspiration in their home lives. According to Rogan, video games are a real problem, going on to describe how they're simply too fun. Continuing his train of thought, he claims, they're really exciting, but you don't get anywhere, comparing the experience to training in jiu-jitsu for 3 years. Rogan sees the two experiences as being quite similar, with fighters getting obsessed with a sport in the same way players get obsessed with video games. However, he claims that the end result is much more financially lucrative than being a gamer, claiming you could teach others how to fight on a smaller scale for large sums of cash. And more of that can be read ahead, link in the description, and you can also watch the original video, which is also a link in the description. Well, what can I say about this? In one way, he isn't wrong. Video games are fun, exciting, and have good messages in the stories that are told in these forms of art and entertainment. But they can also become addicting, especially if you play games where you have to pay to play. I've heard many stories about video game addiction where it got out of control, such as playing EverQuest. A friend of mine told me this story. There was a guy who played EverQuest for hours and hours, and he was so addicted to it he did not want to get out of it. Everyone tried to help him get off of it, but he refused the help. As a result, his wife left him, lost his kids, his job, and had to go to rehab. Another story I remember is that a girl ended up in rehab due to spending so much time playing Fortnite. Now, Fortnite is one of the examples of video game addiction. Now, I did play Fortnite, but I'm not really interested in it. I played Apex Legends, but I'm not interested in buying in a pay-to-play thing. Final Fantasy XIV, I love it as an MMORPG, but I'm not interested in paying to play with all the DLCs and all the microtransactions, which I believe they are a piece of dog crap. So yes, I can agree that video game addiction can be a problem, especially when it comes to buying DLCs for online multiplayer. That addiction can get to a point where it grows out of control and where help is needed. As a gamer myself, there are times where I play games, but I also have certain responsibilities to take care of. Sometimes you gotta get out of your comfort zone to go to work, pay the bills, buy the food, and make sure you keep a roof above your head. Now, if you have kids who play video games, teach them that there's a time for everything. There's a time to play video games and a time to do household chores and homework. Some parents, unfortunately, are too wrapped up in work and in their own silly little lives to take some time to be parents and teach them how to be responsible. And you see how kids who are not taught to be responsible end up as well. When I lived in the Dominican Republic in my childhood and in my adolescence, there were parents that would put the video games away so that their kids could completely commit to and focus on their homework and school. Video games were only a weekends only thing in some families, but when it was time to go to school, they had to be put away. While some parents would only let their kids play every day during vacations or when they hung out with their friends. I was allowed to play video games as long as I did not ignore my homework every day. Because my parents cared so much about my education and passing grades, and yes, I was a good student. And my parents taught me that there has to be a schedule for everything. A schedule to be comfortable and a schedule where you have to do your real world duties. In my honest opinion, video games have been constantly called a waste of time by many parents, journalists, politicians, religious groups, and some so-called activists. I have played video games my entire life, and there were times that I were told that video games teach you nothing, to a point where I was led to believe such things. Almost. To so many, video games and entertainment are a waste of time. It can be if you ignore your other real-life duties. Yeah, because you feel like, oh, I don't want to go to work. Oh, I don't want... But you have to. Because if you don't, how are you going to pay the bills? If you don't work, you lose everything. That's what it is. But of course, video games and entertainment are escapism from the normal garbage we have to deal with every day. You know what I'm saying? Now, there were so many negative things said about video games. A waste of time, they make you dumb. Video games stray you away from God. Saving women in games is sexism. Female characters with skimpy clothing is sexism, etc., etc. But time and again, such things have been debunked. All these journalists, activists, religious groups, and politicians were constantly saying, video games are bad for you for so many years. Well, they said the same thing about rock and roll, about video games encouraging violence. That was debunked like 100,000 times. There is no link between people committing random acts of violence and video games. Because look, when it comes to promoting violence, they said the same thing about rap music. People like Jack Thompson believe that rap music promoted violence. Rap music was a reflection on how life can be in the hood and the issues that face us all in society as well. But enough of that, back to video games. Let us not forget that there was a lot of violence before Pong was invented, and religion played a major role in so many random acts of violence throughout human history. Now in video games, sure, you see Mario saving the princess all the time, Link saving Zelda and getting the Triforce, but have people ever taken the time to listen to messages that video games have? If there's one thing I have learned from Mario and The Legend of Zelda, is that you must never give up even if the odds are against you, and helping others, not just one person. Other positive messages from video games I can add are the following. Assassin's Creed promoted free thought, free speech, and equality. How? The Assassins believed in such things and peace in all things. The Templars, while believing in peace, they believed in order. But both sides can become unhealthily obsessed with their ideals of freedom and order, that they resort to extremes which can lead on the side of the Assassins to freedom with chaos. And on the side of the Templars, oppressive order. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Assassin's Creed. Final Fantasy VII was about the protection of the environment, like Barret fighting against the Shinra to save the planet. Now Sephiroth wanted to save the planet from planet, but his mindset was wrong, saving it from the human beings and destroying all of human beings in the name of Genova and taking it back for the Cetra. He wanted to commit genocide. But Final Fantasy VII was about saving in the environment. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Final Fantasy VII. Mass Effect, like Star Trek before it, promoted acceptance and equality for all races, genders, and sexual orientations. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Mass Effect. Final Fantasy X and Tactics had a message on how tyrannical religion really is, and when they control everything and are tied to governments and kingdoms and feed people with pretty little lies to keep them in line. If you didn't get those, you didn't get Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy Tactics. Life is Strange is known to have a positive LGBT representation and relationships, but it has a message about bullying, problems at home, loss of a loved one, and dealing with the consequences of your actions. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Life is Strange. BJ Blazkowicz fought against the Nazis in Wolfenstein, and many would say he would be a symbol of fighting against the alt-right. If you didn't get that, you did not get Wolfenstein. Dead Space showed how evil and destructive religious zealotry can be. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Dead Space. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn promoted tolerance, equality and acceptance between races. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. I can go on and on about these positive messages that video games have through so many of the powerful stories that they tell. Well, what do you think? With this video and many other things I said, I might just get a lot of heat for this, but you know, things happen. People get heat all the time. So leave a comment, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell button. I am John of Video Games in the World. Have a good one. Peace.